Good evening, everyone. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here again in our month Spiritist Live. My name is Teresa, and on behalf of the Spiritist Federation of Florida, I would like to thank you for being with us. We are very happy to connect with you again, and we're going to have another great topic and another great speaker. But before we start, we're going to do our opening prayer. So if you feel like, close your eyes, elevate your thoughts to God, to Jesus, to the good spirits, that they are here with us, giving us good vibrations, embracing us with their love. And we ask inspiration to our dear guests that will bring a beautiful topic that will illuminate our thoughts, our hearts, and you ask God to involve all of us in this beautiful light, in your love, today and ever. So be it. Okay, again, thank you very much for being here with us. And tonight we have our dear friend, Yuri Castro. Yuri is from Brazil and he's been here since 2013. He's married, has two sons, and he's in Spiritism since a young age. So as you see him, he's still very young. So I imagine he starts as a little boy. And he is currently a volunteer at Conscious Living Spiritist Group. Welcome, Yuri.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Teresa. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I'm going to leave you and have a great talk.
All right. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody who's watching us live, who's going to watch us later. Like I said, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here to be talking about Spiritism in general, to be talking about the specific topic called Lessons from the Seed. So, the idea here is what are the lessons? What can we learn from a simple seed based on Spiritist teachings? So, let's look. The first one that I want to bring, or I guess the first idea, the idea behind this talk came from our daily bread message number 7 called The Seed. And for those who'd like the source material of my slides, I always put them on the top right corner. So if you like it, just go get the book, read them for yourselves. I always recommend that. So message number 7 of our daily bread starts by saying this: in the workings of nature, we see the seed as taking on the sacred role of priestess of the creator and life. The glorious heiress of divine power, it participates in the evolution of the world and silently transmits to the individual its sublime lesson, marked with infinite significance. And I underscored here the word lesson because as soon as I read that, it prompted in my head to think, what are these lessons? What can we learn from this glorious heiress of divine power? And they're also marked, as Emmanuel is saying. Emmanuel is the author. This was psychographed by Chico, dictated by Emmanuel. He's saying that it's marked with infinite significance. That's a pretty bold and powerful statement. It, the seed, wisely exemplifies the need for starting points, conscientious work demands, proper places, and appropriate times. These are already some of the lessons that we're going to be looking today that the seed can teach us about. And then Emmanuel continues by saying, knowing how to begin is a very important skill. Here's another lesson. In our redemptive effort, we must not lose sight of the smallest possibilities. A gesture, a conversation, an hour of our time, or a word can represent glorious seeds for immortal accomplishments. It is crucial, therefore, never to disregard them, never to disregard these small possibilities, or the smallest even of possibilities, which is yet another lesson we're going to be looking that the seed can teach us. And especially nowadays, where we're everything is so hectic, we're expecting results uh, every every day for today, not for tomorrow, not for a week or a couple of days or months. No, everything has to happen now, and sometimes that doesn't come true, and we got to understand that. But taking it from a more macro perspective, a broader perspective, we can even think about ourselves in terms of our spiritual evolution as immortal beings, as immortal spirits. We are but seeds. We are still far from reaching the first order, the first class that we learn from the gospel according to Spiritism. So if we think about it, we're very much like developing seeds. So let's look at some of the lessons. Number one is the greatness of small things. And this is from this book, also psychographed by Chico Xavier, dictated by Emmanuel. And he says, do not disregard the small things you can do for the happiness of others. So for us not to disregard the smallest possibilities, as we just saw on the previous slides, the small things we can do for ourselves and for others, because the reality is we don't know if those things that we think are small are actually small. Number one, for somebody else, they may mean the world. They may mean so much more than we can realize. One example I usually like to do, and we're approaching September, which is Suicide Awareness Month, a lot of people who have admitted to have had the idea or even the plan and the intent to commit suicide or to die by suicide or attempt suicide, they just just by a word of somebody that loves them, or a loving, remark, are you okay? Do you want to talk? Do you need help? Something that is so small had such a great impact in them that they didn't carry through with the act. So number one, we don't know how small those things are. Number two, does not he's saying do not disregard the small things, because the reality of it is also that we don't know what those small things are going to accomplish too. We don't know what those seeds that we plant in others, are seeds of love and understanding, how they're going to sprout and create this big tree that will generate fruits. He also says in the same message here, the most fascinating star in the firmament, although a spectacle of divine power, in the darkness of the night cannot penetrate the isolated hut where a mother's heart pleads for the presence of God, and there perform the mission of a single, very simple, modest candle. Doesn't matter how bright the brightest star is in the universe. When there's a mother's heart pleading for some light in a small, isolated hut, that star cannot do the function, exercise the same power, relative power, of a simple candle. Again, for us not to disregard the small things. Joanna De Angelis, the spirit author, and this is psychographed by Divaldo in the book Empty Life, she talks about the cardiac bomb pulsating ceaselessly thanks to an electric spark so that the blood can circulate and fulfill the purpose of maintaining life. That's electric spark that makes our bodies, our physical bodies, for those that are incarnated, working, is so small we cannot even see, we cannot even hear it, etc. But that is what makes the cardiac bomb pulsate ceaselessly, as she's talking about, and maintain all of this that we have at our disposal. Every monumental achievement we see in our world was at its genesis a simple idea, a simple start. Everything that is great, and this could be from, I don't know, if we're thinking physical, we can think architectural feats, or we can think literary feature, I don't know, achievements, whatever we can think about, started as the seed, this idea in the mind of the creator. So that's the first lesson. The second lesson is about patience. And this is from the book The Way, the Truth, and the Life, also from the Living Spring collection, and also dictated by Emmanuel. He says, this is message number 162, let us hope. He says, if God, the absolute Lord of eternity, waits with patience, why cannot we, imperfect servants also wait. If our God, who is who He is, that we have a faint idea still of what is God, or what God is waiting with patience. Who are we to demand everything done quick and fast? We hurry oftentimes in this world, in these modern times, and we forget the role and the importance of cultivating a virtue like patience. And Emmanuel's going to say, each thing must come at the right moment. The seed, when sown out of season, will not germinate. Having patience for things to develop. Joanna, the other author I mentioned before, also says this patience is this virtue, that's going to help us conquer, the goods of the body, the soul, and the society. Patience. If we only could cultivate patience, just like the seed shows us what patience means, because it patiently grows to reach what it's supposed to reach its essence. So then, the other thing, we already touched a little bit on this. The other lesson we can learn from the seed is this specific conditions lesson. This is from the book Between Heaven and Earth. This was psychographed by Chico Xavier, but this was dictated by Andre Luis. And here it says the seed needs specific conditions to fulfill its purpose. And this is something, for us to think about, that sometimes we surprise ourselves with our ability to grow when faced with adversity. These specific conditions, much like the little image I have there of that seed growing from what would be considered impossible soil to grow from this asphalt. The seed is growing there. It's sprouting, and we oftentimes forget how resilient we can be and how much we have this ability to grow and to blossom. Bringing this to a more specific example, we can remember that how many examples in our society we see sometimes, and these things, we can see in the news about these children that grow in these poor environments with a lot of trauma, a lot of their needs not being met, their basic needs, but still they persevere and they grow and they become like model citizens. They achieve a lot in their professional and personal lives. So these are almost like these seeds in this soil that they're not supposed to grow in a way, but they still persevere, they still grow. And Minister Clarencio tells Andre Luis in this book Between Heaven and Earth, he says, like the plant, the soul can sprout in any tract of soil, but it would be good to sow choice seeds on uncultivated land. Again, he's talking about the idea of these specific conditions for us to grow, for our ideas to grow. And from a biological standpoint, if we think about this, still using the example of the seed, we can see that there's almost no oxygen, hydrogen, and carbon in the seed required to form a tree leaf. Every seed contains a germ that blooms when it encounters favorable conditions. This germ develops thanks to the juices it draws from the earth and the gases it inhales from the air. So that little seed that becomes a tree in the beginning, it doesn't have enough oxygen, hydrogen, and carbon to sustain a single leaf. But then now let's imagine this great big tree with all these leaves, thousands, millions sometimes of leaves, sustaining all of that in the body and the fruits and all of it. In the beginning, that seed did not have enough. But given the specific conditions, given patience, given all of that, the seed can develop. Our mental condition, and bringing this idea to ourselves, from the seed to ourselves, our mental condition plays an important role in the growth of the seeds that we sow. So the idea that our temple mental temple is what we need to cultivate, to make this into a fertile soil for the seeds, the good seeds, to germinate, just like with our hearts, just like that. And if we look at so many different examples throughout Spiritist literature, the romances from, psychograph by Divaldo, by Chico, by Yvonne, all of those cases, we often see these spirits that have been discarnated for sometimes 1,000 of years, and they feel, it seems like they're not going to surrender to the love of God and to the teachings of Jesus. But a word, sometimes the smallest gestures there, can plant that seed in that soil, and with the specific conditions, it grows and they make those changes. When I'm giving this talk in person, I usually like to bring up this picture, and I like to ask people, those little golden seeds, what do they think? Like, what tree is that gonna become? Some people say pine tree, others like make other attempts. But those small seeds that we see in the palm of this man, those tiny little seeds, they can become a sequoia and a giant sequoia. This one specifically is called General Sherman, and they estimate it to be at least 2,200 years old. But they say between 2,200 and 2,700 years old. This is in California, and they just, just as a comparison between the Statue of Liberty and the sequoia, and we have a picture of somebody there at the base. To think that that tree came from a seed that size is just incredible, and it just shows us, as like I said, we're from a spiritual perspective, we are but seeds. Look at how great that tree became, just like we can, with time, with patience, with perseverance, with these specific conditions, with all of these things that we're going to be looking today and talking about today, we can continue on our path to develop, just like spiritual trees. So from this to something as big and wide and with this huge girth as this one right here, as this tree, the sequoia tree. Nature teaches us so much. Another lesson we can get from the seed is in the realm of perseverance. And this is from the book Living Spring. I like to bring different sources when doing spiritist talks like this, just to show the congruency of the material of these different authors, all saying the same things, echoing all the same ideas. In terms of perseverance, this is the message number 124, one of my favorite ones, to be honest. It's called Do Not Become Weary. And in this one, here's what Emmanuel has to say. He says, when the seed was thrown into the dark hole, it wept and despaired and saked why it had been abandoned so utterly. However, when it found itself becoming tall and lush, it moved towards the sun and made itself a respected and benevolent tree, blessing the soil that had isolated it. So the idea, and he finishes by saying, perseverance is the foundation for victory. For this victory against our own negative tendencies, our still underdeveloped spiritual qualities. Having this perseverance is key, because we're going to make mistakes. We're going to be just like the seed, crying and complaining and not understanding. But Emmanuel say, but when the seed became this tree, reach for the sun, and now the seed blessed that soil that was dark and that was damp and that crushed it in the beginning when it was just a weak and small tree. This message is beautiful. Again, I'm going to say 124, because Emmanuel gives also other examples with the marble, the block of marble, the caterpillar, the iron, all of those things. So I definitely recommend reading this message number 124. The other lesson then, which is tied closely together with perseverance, is the idea of the acceptance in the face of pain, resignation. A lot of times we talk about resignation and people may say, oh, but it's passive acceptance. It's not. Resignation, or these acceptance that we're highlighting here, is the feeling or showing acceptance that something unwanted or unpleasant will happen and cannot be changed. This idea that something unwanted or unpleasant is going to happen and cannot be changed. Then we resign. Then we have this resignation, this quality to resign to the pains, to the pains that we suffer, that we're bound to suffer in the state of evolution that we're in. In the book Action and Reaction, psychographed by Chico, this is by André Luiz, Druzo, which was one of the characters, is explaining this to André Luiz when he's talking about the types of pain. He's saying pain is one of the most important ingredients in the economy of life in expansion. The iron under the hammer, the seed in the ground, as well as a baby crying unaware or semi-conscious of the development of its organs, endure evolution pain, which acts from the outside inward, improving the individual. Otherwise, there would be no progress. So he's talking about this pain coming from the outside to the inside to help us, to help the individual progress. There's also expiation pain. There's other types of pain that he explains, but just for us to understand this idea, this resignation that pain is inevitable. We all have suffered. We all are going to suffer it. But the idea is what are we making of that pain? How are we changing from that pain that's coming from the outside inward? We still must go through these trial, expiations, tribulations, however one may call it, in our path to spiritual greatness. And then we jumped into another lesson. And I want to start this one by saying this quote is attributed to Lao Tzu that says, "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." The seed, when it's thrown in the soil, begins growing with a single step by step, but with a single step. So the idea of starting, the idea of taking this first step. Joanna DeAngelis, in this book called Empty Lives, she says that the response to every sowing does not always correspond to what the sower expects. Notwithstanding, a grain that germinates and reaches its objective produces much more than all that were used and did not even survive. So a lot of the times, the seeds that we're going to be sowing, and we can translate that to our actions, our thoughts, everything that we're doing as sowers. A lot of the times, that growth of those seeds is not going to depend on us. A lot of the times. Sometimes it does, or we have a power over that. But a lot of the times we don't, from a subjective standpoint. But she's saying that nonetheless, the grain, the little seed, if you throw 10 or 100, if one that germinates can create much more than the 99 that failed. So the idea is to continue to take this first step, to attempt to do that. And I gave the example here about first steps, starting small, right? Paul, the great disseminator of the teachings of Jesus, one day talked about, this is Paul of Tarsus, the gospel to a handful of people in a simple tent. That's how he started after his conversion. Talking to a group of people in a very simple tent. And then as he continued with his amazing life, he taught thousands, wrote texts that we study until today. How many hearts, millions, billions of hearts he has changed throughout history with his sowing. But he started in a simple tent, small. And if we even think about other people in other, not necessarily just religious realms, we think of Einstein one day learned 2 + 2. Mozart one day had to learn the scales, just playing with the piano. So the idea is to take that first step, just like the seed that germinates and becomes that big, amazing sequoia had to take the first step. And then very attached to that is the idea of the little by little, the step by step, the gradual progress. And this is from the book Jesus in Our Days by Joanna DeAngelis, psychographed by Divaldo. She says, the growth of any ideal results from lower stages overcome and challenges met. The giant sequoia, look at the example we brought, reaches maximum height and girth cell by cell. The universe renews and perpetuates itself molecule by molecule. Too easy a task is a danger to motivation and hinder one's actions. The master's entire life was a constant succession of challenges. It is thus that everything in nature is linked together, from the primitive atom to the archangel, who himself began as an atom. So this is from the Spirit's book, question 540. This idea that even the archangel started as this atom. We're all created simple and ignorant. But the idea is this gradual process that we have been already on to reach the level that we have reached, but we're still very, very far from this, archangel level, and this idea that we're gonna still progress, but we need to focus on taking that first step and continuing with discipline. Emmanuel is very keen on discipline, continuing with that, understanding that growth happens step by step, gradually, just like with the seed. So we do the same thing. Moreover, another lesson is about the essence. I also like to ask this question in person when we're doing this in the Spiritist centers. The seed on the left is from a tree called coco de mer, and this is, I think, from Seychelles, and this is actually a seed. This is not a plant. This is a seed. It's considered the biggest seed in the world known to man. And on the right side, some of you may recognize it, it's a mustard seed. Inside every seed, there's a potential tree. Just like in us, we have these archangels in potential. The idea here of the essence is that the coco de mer seed is going to become a coco de mer tree. The mustard seed is going to become a mustard plant, not vice versa. They respect their essences as they grow. Just like we have this essence of immortal beings, of this little spark of love from God, although created in a state of simplicity and ignorant, as we learn from the Spirit's book, we have this divine essence in us to develop and to grow, just like the seed. The other thing we can look and make a comparison and bring to our lives is this idea of reincarnation, and I have in quotation marks there, reincarnation, because if we think about the apple tree, for instance, starts as a seed, becomes this bud, the bud bursts, then you have this little like small bush like growing up, and then the flowers, and then the fruits. After that, one single apple can fall, and one single seed that came from that fruit, from that initial seed, it's gonna come down to the soil and may again create the tree, the apple tree. So the idea of this reincarnation in the sense of a cycle, just like we are in this process of reincarnating, discarnating, learning, reincarnating, discarnating, and this cycle that we must progress right now, the seed can also have the cycle and endure it with resignation and patience. And then the seed, once it becomes, a tree, at least let's call it for the most part. I know some don't, but it has fruits. And sharing the fruit is important. So the idea here is from message number 122. It's actually called Fruits. Message number 122 from this book, The Way, the Truth, and the Life. It says Christians need to learn a lesson from the good tree. Emmanuel is urging us, which receives the elements of divine providence through its sap and makes them useful for God's creatures. So he's saying here that us Christians, those of us who believe in Christ and the teachings of Christ, receiving the elements of divine providence through its sap. So he's making an analogy with the tree, and make them useful for God's creatures, which is the law of charity, which he means sharing these fruits that we all have, sharing our lights that we all have with others, so others can benefit from that as well. And if we go to the gospel according to Spiritism, there is a message very akin to this one that Emmanuel is saying. In this one, it says, "Then the rich man will consider himself as one who possesses a great quantity of seeds. If he shares them with others, they will produce 1,000-fold for himself and for them, for the others. However, if he eats all the seeds himself or wastes them and allows the surplus from what he ate to be lost, then nothing will be produced, and he will take nothing out of this for others." So the idea again, the charity, the idea of altruism, this idea of sharing the fruits. They're saying even sharing the seeds, the beginning or the future fruits, the fruits in potential. Because the same way, and if we replace the word seed for our talents, our thoughts, our I know financial condition, whatever we may try to like come up here, if we think that we have something to share, if we share that with others, it's going to produce thousandfold to us, but for others as well. If we share our love, the more we share, the more it multiplies. It's an inexhaustible force. So the idea here is, if we keep it all to ourselves, let's think of time. Let's think of seeds as time. If we keep it all to ourselves, if we're run by selfishness, I don't want to share my time. I don't want to go and help people during my time, my free time, or make time for that, or do this, do that. Then what are we doing? We're doing the same thing that they're saying. They're wasting those seeds. We're eating some of that, but we're wasting everything else. And in the same realm, this is a word of advice for the fruits. We have to think of the not so good seeds that generate not so good fruits. Our negative tendencies expressed outwardly have all started as small seeds, I put there. Because if we think about too, like the set idea, hopelessness, despair, or reproachable behaviors, let's say cheating or fooling someone, lying, all those things, they start very small, very small. The good and the bad, that's the thing we must be aware. So what's the antidote for that? We learn Matthew chapter 26. He says, Jesus says, "Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. So watch and pray. This idea that our seeds, who are also the negative ones, start in here, in this mental temple that we have, the soil that's in here, and they can grow. They can manifest themselves. An act of corruption always starts small. An act outside the law starts small. Those things, they start small as seeds, because if we're not observant of our thoughts and we don't take care of our mental temple, those seeds can also grow. And we learn that the flesh is weak, the spirit is willing. Moving on to the next lesson of the seed is about humility. A seed is a symbol of humility. Think again of that tree that I showed before, the sequoia tree, General Sherman. That was once a seed. Nobody looked at that seed of the sequoia and thought, "Oh my God, no, what? Look at that! That seed is so no powerful, so opulent." No, nobody, because the seed is humility, and this is something that we must learn. In all circumstances, we learn from the gospel according to Spiritism. Jesus put humility into the category of virtues that bring men near to God. This is a big statement, powerful statement. Virtues that bring men near to God, humility. And pride into the category of the vices that move us away from God. However, is it possible to be charitable to your neighbor without being humble? They continue, of course not, because the sentiment reduces mankind to the same level by telling them they are brothers and sisters. This idea of humility equalizes us in the sense that we look at everybody else as brothers and sisters in the eyes of God. I'm no better than anybody. We're all spirits. We're all helping each other in this planet Earth, in this time, this precious time that we have here. And then, just to put things into perspective, thinking of our smallness, and this is more physical way per se, this is an example of the sun compared to Earth. And now, how big are we compared to Earth? And look at the little dot there, that's Earth. The largest known star, I had to search this because I was curious, that they found, they call it UI Scuti, SCUTI, is 1,700 times larger than our sun. 5 billion suns could fit into that star. How small are we? We have no idea of how small we are compared to this big universe that we don't know yet. But then we have to talk about pitfalls of progress. We're talking about all these things we must implement and we learn from the seed, but there are pitfalls to our progress and inherent of progress. I put some here, just some, and we can imagine that person walking in those potholes or some of these that we must be able to go over or go around and conquer them. Excessive anxiety, selfishness, pride, arrogance, greed, laziness. Again, only a few. That if we think about, these are all obstacles, these are all things contrary to what we're learning from the glorious Harris of divine power, as Emmanuel put, aka the seed. And these are all things for us to be aware. A descent would be much easier. This is from the book The Way, the Truth, and the Life, message number 99, to promise. That talks about the only easy path being downwards. You should know that you were created for glorious ascent, but that a descent would be much easier. To ascend requires toil, patience, and perseverance, which are essential conditions for finding love and wisdom. To go down is much quicker than to go up. If we think about, there's this quote in business often, or I don't know if it's marketing or business, about reputation, how like sometimes it may take what may take something that may take like reputation years to build, take seconds to be destroyed. With a single word, a single act, a single action can destroy a reputation that was built for years and years and years. To ascend, this glorious ascent is much harder. We must apply all these things we're learning from the seed, all these lessons: resignation, first step, the gradual, humility, patience, all of those things, to be able to reach this glorious and continues in this glorious ascent. Putting things into perspective now, as we are starting to approach the end of our time here together, we have Jesus, more than 2,000 years ago. If we think about the time he devoted to, openly devoted to ministry of the gospel of, that is so important, they say it's only 3 years. It was only 3 years that he was involved in all of that. Those 3 years illuminated humankind and continue to illuminate our paths, have illuminated for millennia and continue to illuminate our paths. All those things that the seed are teaching us are things that Jesus taught us, not with words alone, but with example, with his actions, with his attitude, with the things that he did and he say, and the things that he did not do and did not say, through resignations, through patience, through understanding. Of course, a spirit just like Jesus, billions of years old, was here before the earth was even created, has acquired all these lessons, that we learn from the seed, obviously, and apply them and show them to us. And if we put things into perspective, 3 years that have impacted us so much, 3 years in putting into perspective of over 2,000 years, let's call it, we're 2024, let's call it 2024, 2024 years, it's less than 0.14%. So something that's 0.1% in terms, remember the greatness of small things, something that's so small, perhaps in quantity, only 3 years, has caused such a beautiful and everlasting impact into the souls of so many individuals. Because Jesus was always able to make the most with the least. He didn't need much. He didn't need to do much to show his greatness. So to recapitulate and end our conversation today, what are the lessons? Ended up being 10 lessons. I like the number 10. I didn't realize it's going to be, but it ended up being 10 lessons from the seed. Number one, the greatness of small things. Number two, the function of this forgotten virtue called patience. Number three, how conditions matter. How we must understand the conditions, preparing the field as sowers to make and ensure that our seeds that we're trying to plant, they have good condition to develop. Perseverance as the foundation, as Emmanuel said, is the foundation for victory. There's victory in this battle against ourselves. Perseverance, just as the seed perseveres against the soil, against the ground, against vermin that tries to destroy the seed and everything. Acceptance in the face of adversity, this resignation, this acceptance that some things cannot be changed, some things we don't like. There's nothing we can do and we can't change them. So what we do is we learn from that pain. The necessity of the first step, because if we stay still, we cannot shine our light. If we don't take that first step, we're not going to do the walk like Lao Tzu says of 1,000 miles. If we don't take that first step. Then the other lesson, the evolution, little by little, the idea of the gradual process that is required of us for us to grow and for us to evolve, and having the discipline to continue to grow little by little. The essence working as our compass, or if we think about the north in our compass, that we're gonna follow that essence. And we have the essence from God. We have this spark of love from our great creator. The naturalness I put there of reincarnation of, or the idea of the naturalness of these cycles that we go through and that we change every time we go through, the same way that that little seed that went into the soil became eventually an apple tree, fell again on the floor, germinated again. It's a different tree, but that the cycle is continuing. Humility as a virtue that puts man near to God. So the humility for us to understand our role, understand our value, and not be carried away by selfishness and pride, which are the two scourges of our current moral state. Humility as a virtue that needs to be cultivated, and thinking of Jesus, I think, is the best way to think of humility, of how great he was and all of the things that he showed through his humbleness and through humility. So these are the lessons from the seed. These are the things that we can learn from a simple seed. I wish everybody a very, very blessed week. It was a pleasure being with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuri. What a beautiful message. We we don't think too much about how little things can contribute to create so big impact in somebody's life, right? In our lives. And what a beautiful thing to think about these little seeds that we are and will become this wonderful tree. And
Yes.
it's in so many different ways. What a beautiful lesson. Thank you very much. And we hope that everyone that were here today and will be watching this video later can capture the sense of these seeds. Thank you very much. And
Thank
for
you.
us, our meeting, our encounter, could you do our final prayer?
Sure. Let us close our eyes. Sit in a comfortable, relaxed position. Let us elevate our thoughts to our Creator, to God, to our Father. And with this thought elevated, let us connect with our spiritual benefactors. Let us connect to the divinity that is inside us. Let our brains, our minds be this temple, this fertile soil to the seeds that will grow, the seeds of love, the seeds of understanding. All of those seeds that Jesus, as the biggest sower, has sowed in us. Let us open our hearts through the inspiration of the Spiritist teachings and carry this good essence, this good vibrational energy with us throughout the week. So be it.
Again, thank you very much. And the Spiritist life is also a seed that we want to plant to have more messages available to all of us. Thank you again.
Yes.
We're going to be back. Spiritist Live will be back here on the third Sunday of September. See you then. Thank you. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.